What up, perps? Kid Kobe is back in effect. Purple State Party, you know what we're doing here? Repping America, the center, and common sense. And more than ever, California. So we got some stuff to get to today, so, let's kick it off. So, last weekend, yet another person decided to rush Secret Service and try to shoot at Trump. I don't think that's really what was going on. I think the guy just wanted to commit suicide by cop. Very unfortunate case. Ran at the White House with a gun, opened fire, missed everybody. He was shot, and unfortunately a bystander was also hit. I don't particularly think that this is tied to politics in any way, but we do have one side in this country that sort of believes now that violence is acceptable. As we're going to hear more in this show, these are people who live in an echo chamber. So they never get the other side. They are conditioned to just absolutely reject what the other side says. I mean, here at Purple State, we have to listen to both sides. We have to make informed decisions. We have to consider all of the options. We have to consider all of the people involved in that. We have to weigh that. We have to come up with solutions that work for a majority of the people. Yeah, I think it's kind of simple. So the next story I want to bring to you is it's about math. It comes from the LA Times, citing severe math deficiencies. UC faculty demand a return to SAT tests for STEM applicants. And what this goes to is that at one point we thought, well, the only way to help poor people and disenfranchised groups is to do away with testing. That's what they hide it behind. But the reality of it is that they're pushing people into college that shouldn't be going to college. And they're doing it to fatten up their coffers so that they can pay the teachers more, the professors more. They can sell more textbooks. These people get pushed through high school. They get accepted by these colleges. They take out huge student loans to pay for these colleges, and then they can't make anything of themselves, and they're stuck with the debt. And then, you have some nitwit like Biden who wants to come along and just excuse all of it. And that always sounds good, but when the federal government excuses student loans, somebody has to pay for it. That money has to come from somewhere. That's one of the problems we see in LA, where we need way more firefighters, but there's just not money for it because the money's being spent elsewhere. Good or bad, right or wrong, that money is spent somewhere. But these UC professors, led by mathematicians at UC Berkeley, are saying, we're in the middle of trying to teach college-level math, and we're having to go back and teach remedial junior high math. I mean, that's not a really good solution. That is not really a way to uplift these people. I mean, it's funny because, back in 2020, right, they unanimously voted to suspend SAT and ACT testing requirements, right? Board members cited concerns that the tests were biased against students of color and those of low-income families, including students who do not have access to prep courses. Well, okay, then, let's make the prep courses more affordable. Let's have subsidized prep courses. And of course, at the time, the vote was hailed as bold and visionary, and it was going to expand access and equity. But you can't do that. Just because you say somebody is smart enough to go to college doesn't mean they are. But again, this speaks to what we're seeing in this country with this far left socialist, Marxist, communist, whatever you want to label it as. They don't really care about improving the bottom 25. They only care about ripping down the top 25. That's the way they operate. And that's why you have people like Steyer, who's running for governor in California. He's a billionaire. He already made his money. He doesn't care if you F up the whole system so nobody else can make billions. He doesn't care about those things. I think he's phony baloney, but more on that later. We were talking earlier about, how echo chambers exist. And this was a good one. This came out of the Telegraph. This is about a young black woman named Taryn Thomas. She was a committed member of the pro-Palestinian movement. Then she went to Israel. You know, when Israel invaded Gaza, a lot of the college campuses were, up in arms. Taryn at the time was 19. She was studying human biology at Stanford. And she was introduced to the anti-Israel movement at a Black Lives Matter protest. See how that works? See how they tie these two things together? Like, we already know from history that the anti-Israel crowd is going to get the BLM crowd to back them. But then if they were to, say, actually take power, the BLM crowd's the first crowd that goes. That's the way it works. They did that in Iran back in 1979. The Muslim extremists got the Green and the liberals on board, and then as soon as they took over, they got rid of all those people. Same thing happened in Czechoslovakia and in Russia, where industry leaders funded these movements, and then when the movements took power, they went right after these same people that funded them. So anyhow, Taryn started getting into this anti-Israel movement. As she says here, I never really understood why, but we were told in order for us to be free, Palestine has to be free. See, that's what they do. They convince you that black people will be better off if Gaza's free. So she helped lead large protests against Israel, and within 2 weeks of the October 7th attack, she had joined an encampment. She donned the headscarf. She says, I really loved it because of the sense of belonging and the sense of purpose. It was like instant community. Yeah. That's what they do. They find disenfranchised people and say, hey, be part of this community. They're just using you. You're a useful idiot. Thomas went on to say she was encouraged by faculty members like history professors who validated the movement. It seemed like everyone was a lot more educated than me and very certain and sure of themselves that this is genocide. The only safe position was the more radical one in the encampment. Then one of the protests got out of hand. This happened in June of 24. Several militant students broke into the office of Stanford's president, causing hundreds of thousands of dollars of damage. They spray-painted disgusting things like pigs taste best when dead, death to America, death to Israel, and kill cops, she recalls. I was confused by what our mission was, she went on to say. At what point did the pro-Palestinian movement turn into this anti-Israel, anti-America movement? We completely lost sight of the victims we were claiming to be supporting and fighting for. Yet those behind the vandalism doubled down and justified their actions, even as they harassed and doxed Jewish students. Then in October, Thomas was one of the many students who received an open invitation to the Nova Music Festival exhibition in Los Angeles. Initially, she says, I laughed, thinking, what is this propaganda? I heard about the festival and was curious, but I only really heard the reasoning, well, why would you have a festival next to a contested border? Essentially, they were asking for it. Yeah. Those young women who were raped and murdered, they were asking for it. Yeah. Isn't that a wonderful sentiment from people who claim to be peace-loving, who are there to uplift the disenfranchised? Yeah. So she decided to go. I was hoping, she said, it was going to reaffirm my position. I went with a very closed mind. 3 hours later, she emerged feeling, as she says, so lost. I was hoping that they were going to reaffirm my position and that I'd find Zionist lies and whatever. I went in with a very closed mind. But she felt lost because she stepped outside of her echo chamber for a moment. She saw a different side of things. She saw the truth that Israel was reacting to what Hamas had did and that Hamas has a stranglehold on Gaza. So then, she was trying to figure out her way, and she decided that she would join this 10-day trip in March of 25. It was part of a trip to Israel from a group that was combating anti-Semitism. And she thought, well, if I'm going to speak about this, I got to see both sides. So I give her a lot of credit for that. You have to see both sides if you're going to speak about it. That's why I don't like the far right, the far left, the people who just sycophant for the letter next to their name. There is no P next to anybody's name. There is no purple state. So I'm free to choose who I think's doing best. And that's what she wanted to do. She went over there. She met with Israelis, Ethiopian Jews, Palestinians, Druze, and Bedouins. As she says, I was shocked at how much diversity I saw. I didn't even know Israel had black people. Yeah. On the fourth day, they had to take cover during a missile attack. Our guide, she says, told us to get on the ground, and I put my hands over my head, neck, and prayed. I thought about the irony of how I called for the disinvestment of the very system I was praying for. The missile didn't care about my politics or what I posted or any of that. I was a target, a body on the ground, and I felt utterly useless. When she came back to try to share her story, she was banned by her friends. As she says, I felt like I'm being stoned publicly. She started posting about what she had seen. November of 2025, she posted a video talking about how her views had shifted. By the end of the month, the video had reached millions of views. Boy, I wish I could get that. As it spread, my social world began shrinking. Classmates steadily cut me off. People blocked me, and I became the target of online exposure campaigns and cyberbullying. She says, I lost every single friend. Classmates posted very disgusting things, including labeling her a genocidal apologist. She got death threats and, of course, racist abuse, because if you're a black person on the wrong side of the line, you could be called the N-word. That's what they think. Even her therapist disagreed with her political views and quit being her therapist. The weight of it all left her deeply depressed. She now takes a dim view of the encampment. It completely insulates you in this echo chamber and it indoctrinates you. If you had any questions, you lose your social belonging. And the last thing you wanted to be called was a Zionist. She adds that the protesters' attention turned into this hatred. There were constant calls for normalization of violence. Some activists celebrated the assassination of Charlie Kirk and Brian Thomas, the healthcare executive. So for her, she just wants to go back to school. And as she says, I'm not Jewish, I'm an African-American woman. But a lot of our struggles are parallel. We're seeing an increase in anti-Semitism. We're seeing an increase in extremism. There's just no way that I could sit back, kick my feet up, and call it a day. Yeah, because what did she see? Same thing that happened at UCLA. Jewish students at UCLA were beaten with sticks, pepper sprayed, and knocked out by anti-Israel campus mobs. Our Assistant Attorney General, Hamid Dillon, is suing UCLA right now because they allowed them to build these encampments and to kick, slap Jews, beat Jews with sticks, assaulted Jews with pepper spray. They did nothing. They stood by. There was a Native American Jewish woman who was counter-demonstrating with a sign that said, Hamas supporters are not welcome on native land. Native land, that's one of the things that's important to the left. But no, you're on the wrong side of the line. She was surrounded by a mob and violently assaulted. Meanwhile, UCLA police stood by, did nothing. Occupiers pepper sprayed a woman wearing a Star of David and holding an Israeli flag. They knocked her to the ground, beating her unconscious and opening up a head wound that required hospitalization. One of them even yelled, Hitler missed one. That's what happens when these extremists get out there and are allowed to flourish. I don't want extremists from either side. But USC, UCLA, places like that, they allowed it. Harvard, we all know what happened there. Columbia, Stanford. These people attack Jewish people for simply being Jewish, not for being part of the so-called problem. And now, here in California, the USC and UCLA chancellors are like, well, we're taking steps to make sure this never happens again. But why are they suing us? We've done stuff. You didn't. You didn't do it when it really counted. You allowed these people who scream for diversity, equity, and inclusion, you allowed them to attack other students simply based on their religion or their nationality. And you call that progressive? It's bullshit. So right now we've got this mayor's race going on, and I want to focus on this little interesting thing that's come out. How Bass held a master class in crushing small business and minority entrepreneurs. Right now, LA roads are in a shocking state of disrepair. The state of California has the third worst roads in the nation. We have all that gas tax. Where the hell's that money going to? 28.4% of our roads are in poor condition. And what did Karen Bass do? Oh, no. She torched the program that had been running for 130 years to be in compliance with this damn AB5. AB5 is the one that made it so that independent owner-operators were no longer independent owner-operators. They had to be employees of like Uber and DoorDash, right? Well, what this did was it got in the way of independent owner-operators who hauled debris, asphalt, and materials for LA streets. 100 of these truckers showed up to protest the bureaucratic guillotine dropped on their livelihoods. And the financial bloodbath? Spectacular. But to comply with this, these people who ran these independent haulers were forced out of work. Some of these families dropped $300,000 to get their trucks emission compliant. They used their homes as collateral to abide by city rules. The city nagged them for months to upgrade their rigs, only to send termination letters shortly afterwards. But Bass's following of AB's 5 sacred proclamation declared decades of entrepreneurial service rendered non-compliant overnight. Poof, contracts gone. Yeah. City Hall graciously offered them unionized heavy-duty truck operator jobs instead, because nothing screams we value your independence like forcing proud business owners into civil service. So what does this result in? The maneuver strips away flexible on-call hauling capacity that once kept hundreds of miles of streets and alleys from total collapse. Full curb-to-curb resurfacing, it's vanished. They now just do these large asphalt repairs, which, when you break down the cost, ends up costing more. In other words, you're better off just redoing the whole street than filling one pothole. And now, our maintenance backlog in Los Angeles, $15 billion. $15 billion that they can't pay because they don't have the money. They've spent it on other things. They mostly spent it on giving fat salaries to friends and family to run all these homeless programs and all this other bullshit that LA does. Spencer Pratt, well, he's pledging to revive the program. Like it says here, LA's priority in 2023 wasn't fixing streets or supporting working families. It was ticking an AB5 compliance box. The multi-generational truckers who built real equity and real results got financially wrecked, and the rest of us get to swerve around craters. Yeah, that's what it's doing. LA cannot afford more such experiments. Reviving the independent haul model through B2B exemptions, restructuring, or state advocacy represents a pragmatic step forward. That's what Pratt is bringing to the mayoral race. We need to get pragmatic. We can't just simply say that we are going to jeopardize children's safety by allowing homeless encampments outside of their store, outside of the school, or even outside of your store because they're wrecking businesses. We're seeing, I see it daily. They could float whatever fictitious numbers they want, but we see it. We see it like when my son-in-law's catalytic converter was stolen. The police didn't want to have anything to do with it. They've got more important things. They've got backlogs. And see, that's the problem with a lot of these left-wing proposals. They spend money that's needed elsewhere, but they prioritize things like clean needles or fixing the teeth of meth heads or, the stuff they do. One of the criticisms Bass had was that before the fires broke out here, she went off to Ghana. Why the hell is LA paying for our mayor to go to Ghana? What's the purpose of that? I mean, if we're going to learn something from Ghana, we might be in really bad shape. Now, before I move on here, I want to talk about this assumption that Spencer Pratt has no experience. First of all, every politician has to start somewhere. Secondly, I think being the mayor of LA is about the limit of a first-timer, really. I mean, I think governor might be a little bit above the novice, somebody who's never done anything. I think Schwarzenegger managed to sort of pull it off a little bit. I mean, he didn't cause California to break off and sink into the ocean. Well, that's high praise, isn't it? But part of the problem we have is that in this country, I would say really the biggest problem that we have in this country is there is no news source that you can trust. You know, let's look at the LA Times. Okay, the LA Times has this headline, Mayor Karen Bass is in the toughest re-election fight of her career. She says she intends to win it. Yeah. Okay. They talk about Rahman trying to unseat her. You know, Rahman is just the worst candidate we could possibly put forward as a mayor. She's a socialist. She spent her time on the LA City Council making sure that the homeless can camp in front of schools and in parks. But here's the LA Times at their propagandist best. Reality TV personality Spencer Pratt, whose home was destroyed in the Palisades fire, is waging his own insurgent campaign, portraying homeless residents as a danger to stroller-pushing moms. Really? So they're not? I mean, I'm sorry, but random, crazy, high, drunk people are a danger to us all. And of course, you know, the LA Times goes on to tell us why, why Karen Bass has had such a hard time. You know, here's one. 6 months after the fire, LA was jolted by yet another crisis. This one courtesy of the Trump administration. Federal immigration agents fanned out across the city. Oh, come on. And then they go on to talk about everything Bass did to fight for the rights of these illegal immigrants. I mean, if maybe we didn't have a sanctuary city in place or a sanctuary state in place, maybe ICE wouldn't have had to come here. But we've discussed that before. So let's just move on. Recently in Minnesota, the EV owners found that their renewal for their electric vehicles went up between $300 and $400. Yeah, because you got to cover the gas tax that you're not paying. But, you know, this is exactly how it always works, whether it's government or companies. I mean, think about streaming. At one point, streaming was a lot cheaper than cable, but not anymore. And now, if you pause, you get an ad. But oddly enough, I checked. If you pause during an ad, you don't get another ad. So they're able to advertise to us. They're able to brainwash us into buying their fucking useless products. Governments like to promise something for cheap and then steadily increase the cost. We've seen this for years in California. And the worst part is, then they waste the money and come back for more. So I mentioned Tom Steyer before. I can't stand this guy. Billionaires who become socialists are just, I mean, this is a guy who made his money on private prisons and coal. But he was in Leimert Park, where he, you can always tell politicians are campaigning when they say, the black community is the moral leader of the United States. Oh, okay. I'm not saying they aren't entirely, but that's a weird statement. But as he tried to leave, they started yelling at him about reparations. Don't ever come back to Africa. Africatown, one person yelled. A third walked up to him and said, I better not catch you over here with those devil blue eyes. Yeah, threatened him. One of the protesters actually pulled a knife. But what was interesting in this was that there's this Deanna Wright. She's a 44-year-old social worker. She wasn't surprised by the protest. Quote, black people are really kind of tired of the Democratic Party always coming around here during election season for our votes. It's a brand new day. You can't come over here, offer us symbolism, dancing, singing, pats on the back, and then think we're going to vote for you. Yeah, because this guy, Tom Steyer, is beholden to no one. He's got all of his money. He doesn't care about favors. He will destroy the energy sector in California. We will not get nuclear power. We will not get desalination. We will not get pipelines to bring gas in. We will not start pumping our own gas. No. Under this guy, we will shut it all down. Because he's one of these people who puts the environment above all else. Hey, look, I love the mountains. I love a good view. You know, I love watching Bob Ross as he paints those idyllic scenes of nature. But it has to be balanced, and he's not going to do it. He's really not going to do it. Because right now across the country, this apocalyptic environmentalism is losing its grip. But that's what he wants to bring back. But of course, you know, the big problem is the leading Democrat right now is Becerra. You know, the guy that couldn't even close the border but lied about it. And that's the worst part about what we're seeing in our country, especially coming out of the left. All of these promises. Steyer goes to the black community. Like I've always said, Democrats will never fix the problems of black people, because if they do, they can't come around every 2 years and say, hi, I'm a Democrat, I'm here to help. Look at that, what is going on. Look at the truth. Look at the timeline. Step out of your echo chamber and look at the timeline. Has things improved? Things improve for everybody, and that includes the black community. But just going there and giving them platitudes and promises, enough with this. Enough with the reparations talk. You know how many groups have been victimized by one group or another? You know, we talk about, oh, well, look, you know, Mexico was invaded by the Spanish. Well, they invaded the Philippines, too. And it wasn't like the Philippines, the Japanese, the Italians, the Irish, the Chinese, and countless others weren't exploited and abused in our history. I understand that slavery kind of tops the list of those abuses. I get that. But we need to move forward. We need to move forward pragmatically. We need to move forward as a United States. We need to stop this bickering. I recently heard that Trump was trying to create a slush fund to pay for political dissidents, or whatever the hell he wants to label it as, right? That's not cool. You can't sit there and just say, hey, I'm going to make a slush fund using taxpayer money to protect Republicans. And then what does Gavin do? Gavin Newsom here, little Gabby, he turns around and says, well, I'm going to tax it at 100%. This is fucking ridiculous. We've seen it with the redistricting efforts across the United States. Right now in Huntington Beach, which is kind of conservative, they are represented by a moderate Democrat. Well, now they are going to get a far-left gay Democrat who really does not have anything that aligns with how the people of Huntington Beach actually view. We have slipped back into an era of taxation without representation. What represents the most people should be the model that we use. That's purple. That's a blending of the two. The Democrats have a very good take on a lot of social issues. Republicans have more of a take on individual freedoms and, you know, by being conservative with tax dollars and how they spend them and not going off on these wild types of handouts that we've been seeing from the Democrats. I mean, I don't understand why here in Los Angeles and cities across America, why we're giving out syringes and crack pipes. I don't see why we're passing laws to allow homeless people to camp in front of schools or in parks and to ruin life for others. You know, the LA Times wants to play it off like Spencer Pratt is painting an unrealistic picture that these homeless people aren't a danger to stroller-pushing moms. Every day, more people come here. We have the weather to be homeless. We have the population that hands out free money. We've incentivized illegal aliens. We've incentivized the homeless people. That's not pragmatic. That does not help a majority of the people. It's just like what Taryn Thomas was talking about in those encampments, living in an echo chamber, never looking at the truth of the matter, never confronting the problems that these decisions lead to. I don't know. All I can do now is just thank you all for listening. I love you. And, I just want what's best. Maybe I'll have to run for mayor or something like that and try to bring some of this common sense. I won't have any allies, but I think that's kind of the way I like it. I think the only way we're going to make it in this country is if a bunch of lone wolves just stand up and keep fighting this system. And that's why I support Pratt. Yeah, that's why I supported Trump. I don't know if I do anymore, because I don't think Trump's done enough to unite this country. I think he's just perpetuated the divide, and that's the worst thing. United we stand, divided we fall. I'm King Copious on Purple State Party, and so are you. Love one another. Keep on grinding, and believe it or not, the best way to deal with stress is just dance it out.